All right, we're recording.
All right. So what's up?
Um, Man, I just was clicking through a minute ago, looking at some of your recent posts. I love the way you do your Instagram.
That thing is 9 posts a day on average of just berating life.
um, do you go by Tao or do you go by Taylor or what do you go by?
Man, I just you can just say yo. It don't really matter to me.
Okay, cool, cool. So what do you feel like's got your curiosity most right now?
Oh man, I don't really have any talking points in mind, man. I guess you know December 21st. I feel like if you wanna I guess bring up something that I guess is kind of looming. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like December 21st is kind of the issue here. Overall, all the other little issues is kind of like a ripple from it, like a pre-ripple.
Okay. So tell me more about that. What's December 21st?
That's like the natural reset. The every 6,400 years, it's a natural reset, and all the planets will be in a line. They'll be in a straight line. Every planet in our system will be in a line, and I'm assuming that like a lot of things will happen on all levels, but uh, on a lower, like rudimentary level, probably like you know, maybe worldwide power outage or internet going down for a moment there, everything going offline for a period. I feel like that's like my what I feel like bare minimum will probably happen there, like a reset that way, at least for a few days, maybe like everything just be off probably. I think a lot more would happen, but that's what I think at least would happen.
Well, it does seem like there's quite a bit of disintegration going on in the world right now.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely um a big purge, basically, man. Like like the world got to throw up right now, and it's in that process of like, do I want to get out of the bed and throw up? I gotta. It'll feel better, but I don't want to get up because it feels like kind of not bad right now, but it's still bad.
And are you experiencing that in your body as well, or just seeing it in the world?
I experience it like at some level, like with sensitivity to certain things, like things just be, my body becoming more sensitive to things that were maybe not as painful or I guess inflammatory before. Now they just feel like twice as bad now, if not more, and it just like I don't know. I just feel it in my joints. Kind of feels like, and some on the good side, it feels like the damage I've done to my joints over the years is like really starting to heal a lot in the last year and a half. I feel like really, I mean, like my spine, I feel like really started to heal from like 2012 to 2014, 15. I feel like my spine healed a lot, my posture healed a lot, but then now it feels like the checklist is gone from my organs and everything to like now to my knees and my legs and everything like that is more so going through like a regeneration process. And sometimes it's like days where I gotta, or moments really, not like whole days all the time, but like moments where like I just be like, okay, this is healing right now, I gotta just kind of lay off this for a moment. And then that's kind of like what I've noticed here. Like it's just things have become more gentle to where I can feel the little nuances and the little like phases of healing beginning and ending.
Yeah, that resonates. Definitely sharing a lot of that experience. I'm curious, when you talk about the things that are creating inflammation, do you mean like foods, or I know you don't eat much, but do you mean emotions or energies, or like what are you noticing is with the inflammation?
Yeah, I guess you could tie that all into one, like that. Is anything that like is something that I could tolerate before, that I just can't tolerate now, from emotions to ingredients to it's all ingredients, I guess, but
Hmm.
it's all been, people, whatever. It's all I've become more intolerant in a purging way, not in a way like where I'm disgusted by people or anything like that. It just seems like the energy doesn't let things I guess precipitate and ride out like it used to. So it's just no the energy doesn't even have patience for certain things. It seems like the universal energy at hand seems like it doesn't let me engage in certain things, and if I do, I have a very short leash, so it's no point. You know what I mean? It just
Hmm.
doesn't seem like any worth.
Yeah, it makes me think of like the refinement process. Like it's the metal is getting detoxified more and more, and it's becoming clearer and clearer what the pollutants and the contaminants are, even in subtle ways.
Yeah, like I guess now it got a lot of the mud out the water, and now it's just the tiny particles cleaning. Yeah.
It's definitely like a more sensitive. Like I'm really this word sensitive keeps coming up for me as you're speaking. Um, I'm noticing that too, like um, with fasting. I know that's a lot of what you share is around fasting, and I definitely want to hear more about what you have to say about that. But I'm noticing like I think I shared in our last Instagram discussion, like I'm starting to get to the point where it's like there's so many foods I'm feeling some subtle sensitivity to. I don't even feel like I know what to eat anymore. And it's like I don't know. In some parts, I'm wondering like where's the homeostasis going to be in that process? Like there's just more subtle noticings in foods and things that are creating a little bit of tinges of inflammation that I can feel and see, or like I broke out a little bit this week on my face, which is rare for me, but I just noticed like, oh, I had a little bit of something to create a little bit of gut inflammation, and there it is, like just really really
Like instantly.
instantly, and it's so spot on. My body's just like, nope.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's just like this idea of control. It seems to be the main thing here. Like kind of like watching a movie you've seen before, listening to a song you heard before. You kind of it's almost like being able to predict the future in some way. It's like kind of soothes you and gives you like this like certainty that like this event is gonna happen because I know this part of the song is coming or this part of the movie's coming, so I know what's gonna happen in life. It gives you this illusion of like knowing. And I feel like it's the same thing kind of with the food where you're like, I know if I prepare this, it'll take this long, and then I eat it, it'll take this long, and then I'll feel this way after it for this amount of time, and then it's like this whole process that you feel like and then it creates kind of like a psychosis because you're like addicted to this like concept of knowing. Like it's like a lust of certainty. Like I know like if I make this, that'll take this amount of time, and I know life will play out the way I know it will because I've experienced this whole experience, and it's like this like lust for control, and like it just it ripples into everything in life. That whole lust for control.
Yep, I've got that, or I has that. um,
Yeah, it's like if you just align with the universal control, you're gonna get the things that were designed for you anyway. So it's like you don't have to try to control. It's like reaching for power, you lose power. If you just align with power, it's like the
mhm.
truest power. I mean, there's no real trying in a sense. You just like accepting it. That's kind of like your control is accepting.
Yeah, the words the surrender comes up for me, like um, yeah, it's like um, the the concept of control and the concept of needing to know. Those are two fun ones to play with.
Yeah, yeah. Like it's a wild thing that takes you out of the moment, man. There's so many ways out of the moment, but you're never out of it. That's the crazy thing. You know, it's like
Yeah.
you try to get off the path as much as you fight to, but you're always on it even as you fight. 'Cause it's like it is like, you know, the path is you, I guess, in a sense. So it's funny how like you're never away from yourself. So yeah.
Well, and I've been reflecting recently on this paradox of how we spend so much time doing like the work and doing like whatever it is, like meditation, breath work, journaling, like exploring ourselves. And then as soon as we get hit with the moment, we do whatever we can to run away from it as quickly as possible.
Yeah, yeah. It's a crazy, it's just like I guess a more sophisticated and complimentary way of doing it is just doing it gently, where you like, okay, I've reached the top of the mountain. I know it's time to go back down, but you know, I do it in a more gentle way, more care-filled way. So, you know, I don't, because it's like this fear of going down that creates this like, all right, well, let's just go down as fast as we can. Let's do it, you know, in the most kind of like a control way, whether, you know, people get to high heights and then they just start drinking or doing experiences that they've done before, because it's like they're not going through the process of going downhill and like fully experiencing it, you know, because like it's again just not being in the moment. It's like while you're going uphill, all you're thinking about is the top, you know, and when you're going down, you're thinking about how can I stay up on the top, you know. And it's like if you just experience the whole process, then you can appreciate the whole process. But people aren't in that place, you know. That's not where, you know, it's not where it's at. Everybody's result oriented, and then it makes the results shitty. But if you're like process oriented, enjoying the process, then results come of themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you're not trying to get somewhere besides here now.
Yeah.
It's interesting though. I really appreciate that you mentioned the fear of going down, because I noticed the more we let go in the going down, it seems like the more gentle it is. But also like you need, I have a story. I'm making up this story right now that I've needed reps of going down to start to trust in it, that I'm gonna like survive through it.
Yeah, you've been there before.
Right. And of course, what's trying to survive is not real.
Yeah, yeah. You know, it's like you know, if you kill yourself, you'll birth yourself. So it's like, what are you afraid of, really?
Yeah. So the time cycle that's happening for me is shortening. I mean, I suppose at some point you can live and die in every breath. Um, I would not claim to be there, but it seems like the time horizon of the living and dying is shortening.
Yeah, I guess like with like just the cycles of like ego death, you're saying?
Yeah, like yeah. The cycles of ego death are shortening, and they're
Yeah, I guess you just can't.
Go ahead.
You're accustomed to it almost. You're kind of like accustomed to the discomfort at some level. Like, oh, this discomfort is like just part of the process of unbecoming, you know, and really being. So it's like it's almost welcomed.
Yeah, there's a welcoming aspect to it. It's like and a trusting into it. A trusting into it. Um, I mean, I don't do this perfectly, of course. I fight it all the time, but I'm trusting more and more in the ego death process. Yeah, I'm seeing the cycle shorten, and also the more open, the more opening there is to that process, the more like joy there is in the grief, or the more expansive there is in the tightness, the more possibility there is in the deconstruction. Like it's like um, I'm seeing what I thought before, like, for example, grief and joy. I didn't think those could coexist before. And I'm seeing now, the more I open up and actually allow what wants to be, the more robust of an experience it is.
Yeah, yeah, you kind of don't want to fight either side of the seesaw. It's like you just you can't. It's like if you try to cleanse too much, then you'll crave too much, and it's like it just it's just a funny balance of that, of like just like gradually easing the seesaw until like it's just even, and you have transparency, and all moments are kind of the same in a sense. It's just like an oscillation with the breath, really.
Tell me more about that. What do you mean the oscillation with the breath?
Like everything's just kind of coming down to that. Like, you have like just denser experiences of the breath. You have your experience of like the seasons. It's kind of like a bigger breath at hand, where you have like your inhale, you're taking in light, and then your exhale, you're going through death, you go through winter. And then you have like different phases throughout your day that the way you breathe collects, in a sense, to where you create the memories from that place, from the way you oscillated. So like if you have a bunch of shallow oscillations, and you're going to create from that place, and then you have like a segment or a series or a phase of breathing, and it's like an investment into a series of memories, and you're going through dense collections of breath, in a sense, where you're going through like extreme spikes and like jubilance, and then extreme spikes and like um sorrow or whatever. And that's just a collection of extreme breathing, whether it be like panic breath, or however you want to look at it. It's just not a smooth transition from inhale to exhale over a collective period, because the more you do it over a collective period, then you're going to go through your womb to tomb experiences, but you're going to go through them in a place where your breathing is so constant throughout the memories, and so you're so present with the breath throughout the memories, that no memory is going to ever outweigh another one, because you have that internal or unseen vision, that invisible vision, that within visible vision, where you can kind of see beyond or before what is physically happening, and you can see like, okay, good things are happening right now. So that it's like kind of like it's darkest before the dawn. It gets really bright at sunset and all this type of stuff. So it's like this whole realizing of, okay, even in my comfort, or even when things become really comfortable and nice or whatever, that's kind of like the gears are starting to change at this point, to go the other way, to experience the other side of this experience. Like if you're going to invest a bunch of breaths into being prideful, then you're going to go through your prideful experience and all the things that are created from pride. And then the other side, of the shadow side of pride, being shame, you're going to oscillate from pride to shame, because the way your breathing pattern was. And if your breathing pattern isn't so drastic and isn't prideful, isn't shallow, then it's going to be a different experience. You're going to experience the depths of the emotion. Like you said, like a lot of people, you said, it's a robust experience when you experience it all. Because like a lot of people, like they're going through cover emotions. It's shallow, it's cover emotions. So a lot of people, they claim to be angry, or they come off as angry because it's like they're protecting themselves from the depths of their own emotions, and protecting other people from, you know, um, it's really self-sabotage. I wouldn't say it's protection. It's really, they feel like they're protecting themselves, and they're protecting other people from this part of them, but really it's just they're not letting themselves live, and they're not letting themselves connect from those depths. So when you're not fully breathing, fully expanding like that, then you're never going to tap into those depths. You're going to stay at a cover emotion. You're never going to experience both ends of the pool. You'll stay in the shallow side of the pool the whole time. So then there's no contrast in your life to appreciate bitter and sweet. And the more that you are doing things fully, then bitter and sweet are really not separate from one another. They're just two sides of one coin. So you can never really have a value system of one being greater than or less than. And your breath is just more and more even the more that you look at life like that. And then it's easier to act accordingly, what's necessary for the moment when you are oscillating evenly like that in a balanced way. Like, okay, this is the moment where this has to be expressed, so it does need to be expressed, and it's all more apparent, so you won't get caught up in emotional turmoil that distracts you from the breath. It's just like it compounds the problem. Like you get distracted from the breath or whatever trauma happens, and then you don't breathe, and then you create from that shallow, distracted place, and more distractions get created, and you just continue to spiral and get caught up in that web. So it really is just an oscillation of inhale and exhale that like solidifies into memories in a lot of ways, because you're inhaling light and exhaling light. So it's like, as a projector and a projection, you're this memory making machine and memory storing machine, however you want to look at it. So it's pretty much what we're doing in our life is creating memories and storing memories and exchanging memories. So as that, the way we're doing that, the way we're projecting it and creating that light and creating that film is through the breath. That is the projector, and that's the substance or the source, the energy that we're using to mend that light together to make a memory, to make a visual, to make a sound, to make whatever we're making. But it's vibration that we're inhaling and exhaling that is the epicenter of that creative process.
Damn, that was beautifully said. Oh shit.
Word.
Oh. Wow. I don't know what to say to that. That's amazing. Yeah, I was noticing how much deeper my breathing was getting as you were talking, and slower. And I noticed how unconsciously I behave when my breathing's really shallow. It's been my check-in is like, where's my breathing? And there's like a shallow breathing is like constricting the aperture that I guess unmanifest is moving into manifest, and manifest is moving back into unmanifest. And I've never said this before, but it's coming to me now. Like the more deep and slow and full you're breathing, the wider the aperture.
Yeah, just could you imagine a planet full of people that are conscious of the breath? And because like I always tell people, like, what made, when they ask me what made me vegan or whatever, I'm like, man, I met this woman. She was so calm, and her calmness was a calmness I've never seen. So I didn't even know that pace existed, and just the expression of that pace forced me to change my whole life. So I really feel like, yeah, if you just have people around the world that were operating from a different pace, that only way you can operate from a different pace is your vision or your perspective. If you're looking at things from even beyond bird's eye or whatever, total inner vision, you're looking at things from a place of like immortality or eternity. So it's like, where's the rush? You know what I mean? Like God is in no rush.
Mm-hmm.
So, everything's still happening. Creation's in no rush. The sun is in no rush. So it's like, aligning with those attributes, we can align with the creative process, and we can see how things unfold. And the more that you do that, the more the patience, I guess, develops, because you're not separate from the immortal part of you, and that's your viewpoint of life is from this immortal place. And so if you're looking at life from that place, your pace is going to be totally different, because it's like, where am I rushing to? I'm rushing back to myself, because this is ultimately where I came from. And if there was more people operating from that place, then it would just force people to check themselves as they move, rush around in life and chase things. They would have these like sentinels of pace all around them, pretty much being like, hey man, you don't have to do that. I mean, you can do what you want, but this is available to you, this pace and this state of being. And it's so much distraction and people that are distracted and operating from shallow and transient places or transient perspectives, opinions, all those things that can change and that are not immortal. They're behaving from them places. So it's not very many examples. The pattern is an internal one at this point. So it's so obvious, but it's since it's internal, it's not obvious to the physical avatar so much. Mm-hmm. From those sense organs.
Yeah, from those sense organs, and we live, at least in the U.S. in 2020. It's our collective consciousness is in a very exterior focused consciousness. There's not, part of the I think part of the breakdown that's happening in the world right now is a move back into our interiors. I mean, both exterior and interior. But it's like we've become completely exterior focused over the last, I don't know, 100 years. Maybe.
Yeah, I guess it's just the season of consciousness. Ultimately, like you gotta get really, really external and shallow before it can shift. The nature of change is kind of like that's the nature of change. You gotta get winter solstice, summer solstice. Got to be abundance of light before the days get shorter, and abundance of darkness for the days start to get longer. So it just seems to be like seasonal consciousness, and people get caught up in seasonal consciousness, and then it creates like generational wealth or generational disease, getting caught up in a season of consciousness.
I'm curious about the seasons, because you mentioned December 21st and all the planets being in a line, and I'm wondering what happened 6,400 years ago, and can we learn anything from the patterns of information then and now? Like what season, what weather are we in? What season are we in? What time of day are we in?
Yeah, I mean, based on like that idea, we will be coming out of a winter and into a spring. We'll be coming out of an Iron Age going into a Bronze Age. Based on that information of the 6,400 years, we're going into a Bronze Age out of iron. Iron being pretty much just dense and unconscious, and a winter. And then so it's not necessarily a summer. It's not total like full spectrum light awareness, just warmth. It's not like that, but it's going in that direction. I feel like it's more so spring, I guess you could call it. And then fall would be to me is my favorite season in general. I love fall, the colors, and then you reaping the rewards of the summer. And yeah, I feel like there's nothing really, every season's pretty dope in its own way, but the consciousness, the grander seasons, the more grand seasons that are happening, I feel like, like based on the information, we're going into a spring out of a very, very dark winter, cold winter. Mm-hmm. I don't really know. It's on the historical side of things, it's tough to trust, man. It's tough to trust carbon dating. It's tough to trust really a lot of what anybody says, because it's another side to all the stories.
Right.
If you investigate one end of a spectrum, it's like you investigate the other end, and it's kind of like nothing gained, and it kind of dissolves the concept altogether, like when you investigate both sides. So I don't really know. I can't say I know for sure what was happening. You know what I mean? I guess at that point it's pre-dynastic. Mm-hmm. Egypt was going on at that time. Mm-hmm. I don't really know. I feel like it's the more things change, the more they stay the same. It's probably a world it's really always a world government, just how peaceful it is and how totalitarian it is, I guess, or tyrannical, but it's always going to be a world government, because there's a universal governing body or force always, because we're coming out of one source. So there's this metaphysical or spiritual government that is being reflected into a physical government, and then a bunch of other constructs that come, smaller governments, local governments. It's all reflections of bigger governments, and ultimately an unseen government, whether it be shadow government, and then beyond the shadow government would be the totally metaphysical government that is at work here. And I feel like it's always just gonna, it's always gonna be that way. It's just like the perception of it is tough. When you're going through a consciousness season of winter, it's probably a lot more difficult to stay in the moment, to vibrate at a rate that is peaceful. It's more of a challenge, but making it through that winter, probably just a stronger seed anyway on the other side.
Yeah, I'm really appreciating the awareness of a metaphysical government, and then how that manifests in different. I want the word hierarchies is coming up for me, but really it's like nested dolls, like in an individual, in a family, in a household, in a community, in a locality, state, national, global, and then there's the light and the shadow of all of those constructs.
Yes, it's all coming from a small place, the government reflecting the individual's sovereignty, their own internal government, the collective. It's like it becomes a collective, like the government is a collection of the potential that we don't use. So all the potential not being used by the collective of people or beings, that is what is the summation of the government.
Wow.
So that's what they so it's really no like good or evil thing. It's just like, how much are we giving up? That's the government.
I mean, it's in the word to govern.
Yeah, you like unconsciously giving it up. So it's like something's gonna use it. It's gonna get, probably get used against you, but it's gonna get used. Nothing gets wasted here.
Yeah, it's making me. I've been curious around external governments being projections of internal governments, or lack thereof. Right? Like, how much do we create? How much does external government manifest as a result of our inability to internally govern?
Yeah, and then like, how long does it take? But I guess ultimately, if you have one very powerful individual in a good or bad way, it could shift the whole landscape for everybody. So it's kind of illusory in a sense. It's like, as soon as one person activates or taps into that part of their being, it like ripples into everybody. If human beings discovered the ability to levitate or fly, it would only take one of us to remember or to activate that part, and then it could be taught. Mm-hmm. I don't feel like, or just maybe just being exposed to, you would just realize it. But I feel it really only takes one of us to activate an area, and then it's already the beginning of the end for the parasite that was governing that potential. They're going to do whatever they can to try to suppress so that they can for job security, position security, as long as they can. But ultimately, that parasite's going to get reduced and reduced and reduced and reduced until the seasons change, and then there's less potential being used. And so then there's this parasitic governing body that is governing that level of energy or that ability and everything that comes with that, and it's kind of like a sentinel. It's kind of like, in some ways you look at it like, man, if I had certain powers at certain levels of consciousness, looking back in my life, I would have abused those powers anyway, and it would have been very hurtful for myself and others. So at some level, it's kind of like, man, I don't really see parasites as a bad thing. They just are what they are. They just play their role, and you can't expect. It's not like you get in a bed with ticks and expect them to like cuddle you. They're gonna do what ticks do. you know.
Yeah, and it kind of gets me this question of like, does the environment create the parasite, or does the how much of the environment? I'm looking at the parasite and the environment co-creating each other, becoming aware of how intimate that relationship is. And when you're talking about the seasons, it's like sometimes the environment is what changes instead of
Yeah,
the parasite.
like symbiosis with a parasite would just be like if you had something that you can't process, you know, or that, and you just use the parasite as a means of processing that until you can process that, you know. And that's pretty much what it is, whether it be emotional you can't process or food that you can't, because you're going to eat the food because you're not processing the emotion. So now you're eating this food that you can't process, and now you need this physical parasite that is just an extension of that energy, that lack energy, you know, that emotional lack energy of like, oh, I can't get over this, I can't process this. Accepting that, you know, invites the physical parasite that, you know, basically repeats that and puts a loudspeaker on that ideology, you know, of not being able to and being limited. So the more you feed the parasite, the more it just picks up microphones and it just gets louder and louder. And as you starve it, it gets really loud. But once you get through those phases of letting it get loud, it's like when you compress something. The only way the only way that you can let something to compress something is to let it expand. You know, let something fully expand, and you can squeeze it. You
Mm.
know, and then so it's kind of like the same thing, like where with the parasites, like yeah, it's a funny thing. It's leveled. It's like it's a really layered situation with parasites. Like I said, like the more you feed it, the more it expands. The more you starve it, the more it's gonna scream and have a temper tantrum. Your body's gonna go through temperature control problems, and while that happens, you know, it just wants you. It's like a spoiled little kid, basically, like the kid inside you that got ruined. You know, so if you feed that and try to suppress it for like momentary satisfaction, then it just expands and gets louder and stronger and more ground. But if you starve it out, then it's gonna take a nap. It's gonna lose ground in the system, and then as you shift to feeding a different area of your body, then it just loses ground. It just has less and less ground, and then if there is anything that it could process that's like complementary for the both of you, then you could break it out. And I mean that like in the sense of like you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. In a sense, like if you are 8 years old or I don't know 12 years old, and you develop certain levels of like I don't know humility or personality that can be you don't want to just totally discard all those experiences, but this one area of that period of your life was traumatic and was not fully addressed, and you weren't fully present for the emotions and fully present for the scene. So you got to just become fully present for that through breath work, through trance work, which is breath work, so that you can release that and be present for it, so that you can discern and take, you know, I guess the fresh fruits that you got from that period in time, you know, and it's just about application, you know, and then whatever you learn through that process will teach you about other parasites or other parasitic parts of you, you know, and it's just there's really no negative to it, or if there's a negative, it's like functional.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm feeling a lot of energy around what you just said, and I'm really curious to like get a little more clarity. So you're saying you have a breath work practice to where you become aware of traumatic experiences you had in your past, and through the breathing exercises you're doing, you're able to um, bring awareness or light or consciousness into that experience, relive whatever was walled off, and then reintegrate that part of yourself into your being. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, the more that you go into the parasympathetic nervous system and slow your breathing down to one or less breaths per minute, and then you're in a delta state, your brain waves are in a delta state, then you can go into that, because that's where you go when you're dreaming. When you dream, you're addressing all that subconscious, or what we're calling subconscious, all that, everything that's buried in there. So when you're doing it in a conscious way, controlling the breathing, reducing the amount of breaths per minute, expanding the diaphragm, and creating those pressure locks, then you allow the cells of your body to go into that state in a conscious way, to where they can re-experience that experience from what you would call a memory, but that's really just a holographic recreation of the event inside of you. And if your whole being is present for that, then you can release the emotions associated. But only way to do that is really just through the trance work, through the breath work, so that you can get beyond the identity of being this person, or being, whatever concept or limitation, and that isn't the awareness and the attributes that come with the universal awareness. The more that you can step into that likeness and to that perspective, the more that you can revisit those experiences that you haven't been present for, the cells of your body haven't been present for. The more that you can release everything that is associated with it, because the parts that are not present for it is basically like a debt sheet in a lot of ways. It's just like collecting debt and not being. If you have a big chunk of your body that's not present for an emotion or for a memory, it's still holding on to it by neglecting it. And anything that would be developed isn't being developed, and that's creating it's just repeating the vulnerability scenario for having the same exact memory getting recreated, but relative to whatever physical state you're in now. But it's all still metaphysical to physical, and buried in different levels of the tissue. So if there's a tension at some point in some part of the body, the circulation is going to be obstructed through that tension, because wherever the blood goes, the tension flows. But if you have, through the breath work, you have full circulation. So then all the layers of tissue get to relax, and then the blood flows cleanly throughout the whole system a lot easier. So then you can bring all that to the surface. You're going to go through breath work, and you're going to go through all the temper tantrums in your life, everything, all the anger, all the emotional stuff. That's all going to get brought to the surface, because it has to get purged. That energy. It's like when you throw up. You taste what you just ate after you throw it up. You kind of, right. Like you're like, oh, that was definitely the so and so that I ate, that I just threw up right now. So it's kind of the same thing with purging the emotions. It's like, as you're throwing it up, you're going to remember. You have to go through that process of remembering, like, oh, that was the such and such that I ate, or when I went through this memory, that's what that was. Because a lot of times you're going to have blind emotion, blind sadness or anger, whatever, and not realize, just think you're in a bad mood, but that's just you throwing up and not having identified, oh, I ate this and it was poisonous to me. That's why I was feeling this way for a year, years. But if you're not addressing things as they come, and then you keep putting them on the back burner, it's like this huge line out the door of people that you owe, basically. And those people are you, in a sense. It's just like the parts of you that are not present, you owe it to those parts to be present, so that you can release that energy, so it can circulate. And the more that you don't, it's like having a bunch of tabs open. It's like having hundreds of tabs open, and your energy just can't be focused on one. So you just stay stuck in a slow developing, downloading state, and your emotions are heavy and slow, because they're like being processed. Like if you're watching something and the buffering speed is just so slow, and then you get like 10 seconds and then it stops, and then you have to keep doing it. And like that's kind of what it's like when you don't fully address your emotions and just be present with the breath, like, because that's going to take you back. The breath is immortal. It's not It's not the personality, it's not the thoughts, it's not the feelings, it's not the visuals or whatever. So when you get back in touch with that part, with the breath, you're getting back in touch with the immortal, immovable, intangible parts of you. And on your way to that, you have to go through all those other experiences that were between, between those states of being, the state of being you're in now and the state of being that you, I guess you could say, start from, or the likeness that you come from, unshakable peace. So in order to get back to that, you have to go through all the whole process of reduction from that.
You got away with words, man. That's epic. So tell me about the evolution of your process. Like, I know you said you went vegan at one point, and I'm sure breathwork came online, but like, how have you seen like the stages of your process evolve? Like, where are you now? What do you feel like's calling you next? Like, talk to me a little bit about the journey.
Well, like hindsight 2020, going vegan in 2008, when I moved to California, that was, I guess, ultimately from being an active child and being into athletics. I kept some level of breath and circulation going, and I wanted to be in my prime competitive shape. So when I was exposed to veganism and I saw physical benefits from it and healing benefits from it, personally, it was easy, to get hooked, and I didn't realize that through that process of becoming vegan, I was opening up more cells to breathing in my GI, my digestive tract. So more of my body was breathing, and I wasn't really aware, that that's what was happening. So, Sebi made it pretty clear, because he had this product like Viento, he called it the Wind, and he was saying you want herbs that are high in iron for blood and high in oxygen, rich in oxygen. So at some level, I kind of knew the air thing was important, and I heard of people going into the mountains to try to heal and stuff, and I heard of yogis and stuff like that. But really, I guess that was being more communicated within my body. The communication got better as different areas of me started being able to breathe more, and then I guess I just reached certain thresholds in the process where I was like, okay, this isn't an unconscious communication anymore. It's not like I'm talking underwater anymore. This is apparent. This thought has went from subconscious underwater thinking, like, to above water. I can hear the thought, and it's taking me more towards this state of less, needing less, and what came with that was more so the breath. So the more I detox, got into raw, and detox the people in my life, the more the breath became apparent. And then after I got technique, because I got exposed to breatharianism early, but I didn't have technique. So once I got exposed to technique of breathing, then I could apply it, really apply the knowledge and make it practical. And that's really all it took for me, man, making it practical and not making it like hocus pocus and something that's not really grasped through a practice. So I saw benefits from the practice instantly. By 2012, I had read Medunetta or Medunetta, however you want to pronounce it. I read that, and I read the first 3 series, and it gave me the instructions I needed to where by 2012 I was doing correct tumo. It wasn't the best. It's not like now, but it was creating the ripple for now. So by 2014, I had saw overwhelming benefits and overwhelming results in my personal life from the breath and not eating foods that got in the way of it. Because people say, like, what do you eat? And I was like, it's not about the food. It's about just not getting in the way of the breath more so than anything for me. So that became obvious to me that the breath it's vital. So it was affecting my vitality when I was blocking it, obstructing it, or if I had it, left it unobstructed. So I wanted to share that really bad, and became increasingly difficult to share it as the years went on. And I tried to force sharing it, and that only made life harder for me. And it made me fall off. It made me less disciplined because I guess, when you're in the process of force, it's kind of like it goes hand in hand with rape, and you're trying to make people do things. So then people try to make you do things and try to rape you in other various ways, whether it's your time or energy, money, whatever it is. It's like different levels of that same rape energy. So the more that I became aware of, like, okay, the breath is obviously pretty much the opposite of rape energy. It's like the most like accepting and supportive thing. And it's not trying, it's like water, water is nourishing without trying to. The breath nourishes you with whether you try to, whether it's not trying to nourish you, it just is. Every breath you're taking is keeping you alive, whether you try to be alive or not. It's like the breath is gonna keep coming. It's just what it does. So like the likeness of the breath and the benevolence of the breath, the patience of the breath itself, and it's not judgmental. It's just is what it is. The more that I align with all these and those attributes, the more that it took me to places where I just found myself not around the people that shared that perspective. And I was okay with it because I had the technique and the experiences and the breath. And it was a shock to, I guess, the physical avatar at some level, because you're like, wow, I really found the key to so many things, and I want to share this with so many people. But I can't force it because that's not in accord with the breath. It's not rapey. And it sucks that I'm alone in some level because I want to, but on another level, it allows me to practice more. And since I've become so acquainted with the breath, I can handle this solitude. And so it works. It all, like one hand wash the other, really. And they both wash the face. So it really worked out, like, in a lot of ways. But just as the process is going and as you think about it, it's like, the more you think about it, the more like difficulty comes. And that's what I think too with breath work itself. A lot of people get caught up in like, oh, I got to do an hour, you know what I mean? I got to do this. I'm thinking about the sets. It's like, if you just start a session, you're going to feel different. A few breaths in, maybe 7 breaths, maybe 10 breaths, but just start, count if you need to, don't count if it's annoying, and just start. And then you be present with the breath, and then you'll be present with how you really feel. And it's not, it takes you out of that idea of like, oh, I don't feel like doing this, or having to do something that's like, considered a discipline or work. It's more so an enjoyable thing. The more that you give to it, the more it gives back. So it's taken on a totally different perspective the more that I just do it. The more that I just be like, man, I'm not doing anything right now. And I'm connected to everything. So through this breath, that's my vehicle for my connection. So that's what I'm gonna cultivate, that connection. So that was, as the years went on, I got to about, I guess, 2017, after I had some deaths in the family and a bunch of issues, man. Bunch of issues in the material world, that part of me wasn't, the part of me that wasn't scared is the true me, the part of me that's always at peace is the true identity. But that part, and I had a connection with that part, but like, that was the part of me that knew ultimately, like, by all means, all intents and purposes, the way things look, you're dead in the water and you got nothing going for you at this point in your life. You've lost everything. You lost people that you can't get back. And the only way that you can even survive this without harming yourself or others is the breath, And so I just reached that. I reached my wits in it, I guess, at one point, and I just got really back on the breath consistently daily. And so, yeah, by 2017, I was back on the breath consistently daily. And every day from that point on was more magical than the last one, or just equal. You know, they just become more and more magical, and like just everything clicking. And in 2017, you know, I found out about Martin Kinney at the time, and at the time, I was, when I got privy to his information, I was like, that's a December 21st thing. So I was like, man, this is like really interesting, and it feels true in my heart. But we're a little few years out, and I don't know if I'm willing to just doomsday prep right now. So I put it on the back burner, you know, and every day as the breath got stronger and stronger in my life, there was more synchronicity and more confirmation that this was really happening. And then 2020 is just like ultimate smack in the face that this is really happening. So to me, it's just becoming more apparent, you know, and I feel for people that were not into self-mastery and this type of information, because I know that there's so many layers to distraction right now. There's so many ways you can be distracted. It's like amazing. So it's really funny. Like, man, I feel like I got gifted this information. It was kind of a burden, but now it's like, man, I'm so glad that I'm aware that this is the supernatural creating natural events, and then the unnatural follows that. So it's like this whole chain, you know, going, and pretty much we're watching things play out, man. We're watching like the pre-alignment right now, and everybody else that's at a different perspective, at a more transient perspective, they're at a different level of distraction. And the people that are into self-mastery are just like immersed in the present moment, feeling all the feelings of the collective into the breath, you know, propelling us into the future, you know, and that's really, you know, the wild thing, because there's only a few people guiding this whole experience right now, because people are distracted by fear, or, you know, you just have a few people that are controlling the energy. That's really about it, man. And it's a wild thing to see how the small is changing all, and how less is more, and how small numbers of people control so much. And I don't know how, I don't know if that will ever change, you know. I feel like it'll probably always be like at least sages at the top that need to be distant from the world so that they can cultivate the connection for everybody that wants to be in distraction. Because at some level, I guess that's here for that, you know. People are here for that, to experience the distractions. So it's like, you know, let them have their fill. And so they're probably like this massive, about 80% followers, probably about 15% people like intermediary, like mid management level, and then like 5% sage, or what people refer to as like the 1% on a tangible end, you know, people that control the money and everything. But I feel like it's probably only like 1 to 5% of the world always controlling the world all the time anyway. So it kind of lets you know that it's a diluted energy system, and that it's like a house of mirrors, and a bunch of people are fragments or holograms that are really like just reflections of light, and they're not the projectors or cultivators of light. So it's just like even more distraction, because you see like all these reflections running about, behaving in ways that you want to help them because you want for others what you want for yourself, but they're not really there because they're not present. So you're not really there, even if you're physically tangibly here. If you're not present and relaxed and in the moment, if you're not, I shouldn't say, I guess you're relaxed even in dangerous moments. You know, people find ways to have resolve and be relaxed and be steadfast. So yeah, the more relaxed and present you are, the more that you're here. If you're not, then you're in fear, you're in concept, you're not really present, so you're not really here. And so I would say it's probably about 80+ % of the world's not really here right now. So I don't know if they ever will be. And it's just, it's a funny thing, kind of like how the way life is, because even in negative exchanges or uh, exchanges that don't feel complimentary, where you run into somebody that is present and maybe they're just present in a way that is offensive to the world. They're taking advantage of the present. You know, they're not going to another level of presence. They're staying honeypotting because they know presence is what it's about, and people will buckle to them because they're more present than them. So they are evil. And you run into people like that, and you're like, wow, like, you know, you do prove their presence is a controlling factor, but in this way. And then you run into people that are present in the other way, and it's like, okay, you're ultimately aligning with the ultimate power. But it's wild to see, because you don't get to see it all the time. You know, you only get to see it from the inside or from rare occurrences connecting with people, because it's so much buffering with holograms and people that are not really present. You know, you got to go through hundreds of them to get to one real one. So it's like, it's a difficult situation. You know what I mean? It's like really being in a house of mirrors, like the Bruce Lee scene and shit. Like, you don't know which way to shoot or attack, because it's so many mirrors that it's like you just got to like draw them in and wait for them to come to you, and then attack from your own sphere, because it's like there's no point in chasing at this point. It's obvious that the general population has been used as like a buffering agent between the real people of the world.
Wow, I've never heard that. That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah. They diluted certain archetypes so that it could be a bunch of distraction, a bunch of separation, but it feel like there's a strength in numbers, but it's diluted energy. It's the same amount of energy.
It's inflammation.
Yeah, that's it. It's wild.
So tell me, I've never done Tumo. I've done Wim Hof, and I've seen you've written that you find Tumo much more helpful than Wim Hof. So help me understand from a practical side, what does the breathing practice look like? How can I start practicing it? Yeah, anything there you could walk me through?
Well, like Tumo is really a test of patience in a lot of ways. It's a more patient breath. It's not as you're not going to get your psychedelic effects from Tumo as rapidly as Wim Hof, but you get your long-term benefits from the Tumo. Like, Tumo is taking you in the parasympathetic nervous system, where you're doing all your healing, you're restoring the endocrine system so that you can, you know, restore your endorphins so that you don't crave anything. When your endorphins are off, if you're going to crave, you know, if you are short on melatonin or short on serotonin or short on dopamine, those all have different cravings and emotions that are associated with that lack. And to restore the endocrine system is you have to go to the parasympathetic nervous system, which is what you go to when you're sleeping. So if you're consciously going into that state of relaxation, you can restore the endocrine system, restore the endorphins. And then at the same time, you know, scrape on your subconscious, you know, bring all that old emotion to the surface, and those unresolved and memories that you weren't present for, you can get all that resolved. And it just keeps your heart rate at a lower rate. You know, it's less breaths per minute. So it's keeping your heart rate at a lower rate, less beats per minute. You know, it equates to longevity. So it really is like a great base for breath work, but you get extremely hot when you do Tumo. You know, especially if you're eating insulating foods, inflammatory foods, mucus forming foods, you're going to get really hot. You're going to lose temperature control, and then you lose your temper. And a lot of people at that point, that's when they quit Tumo, probably about 15 or 20 breaths in, because they get so hot. So I would say you could use Wim Hof in that, do 15, 20 breaths of Tumo, then do 5 breaths of Wim Hof, you know, of that method, I mean, and then you return to your Tumo as your base, and then you get hot again, and then just keep repeating that until you got an hour in, and then, a few hours later you do it again. But Wim Hof, the method itself, that is that's never taking you out of sympathetic, because you're always breathing too many breaths per minute. And 18 or more breaths per minute locks you in sympathetic. So then you're in fight or flight mode. It's exhilarating, and you get a lot of blood into your tissue, and you get a rush and a psychedelic effect, but it's not as steady. And the psychedelic effects that you get from Tumo, even if you're mixing it, the psychedelics you get from Tumo are a lot. It's not the same kind of rush, like you can drop your body through Tumo, but the process of doing it isn't going to be such a like, oh my God, I might fall out my chair right now. You know what I mean? Whereas Wim Hof, like if you can hear your breathing, you're doing it wrong anyway. You're not supposed to hear your breathing. So because that's already going to affect the nervous system and make you click. It's like if you're running or somebody's chasing you, or if you're in an athletic event, your body is hearing your breathing even though you're not hearing it. If you run long enough, you don't even really hear that you're breathing heavy. But your nervous system is like already like your sensory, it's like a sensory deprivation thing where it's like blocking that out because you're in this other nervous system. You're in sympathetic already. So you don't hear yourself breathing, and you're pretty much just like zoned out from it, even though your body is hearing the breathing. So people, when you're doing those things, you're just staying in the sympathetic. You're staying in a state where you can more easily release adrenaline, which affects digestion, which blocks dreams, which makes you tired when you wake up. If you're not going into parasympathetic consciously throughout the day and training the body to do that, when you go to sleep, all this subconscious stuff is not being addressed consciously. So you're going into sleep and you're going into all the traumas because, that's the way you're balancing life. You're not using your conscious period of your day to delve into the depths of your being. So when you're unconscious, that's when you're going to do it. And so all the traumas that are stored in that are going to be coming to the surface during dreaming. So when you're sleeping, you're not really resting. But if you've been doing breath work, parasympathetic breath work, Tumo breath work throughout the day, once you do go to sleep, you're really resting. You're really going into the dreams in a more conscious way, or parallel lives, whatever you want to call it. It's gentle. It's way more gentle because you're not hearing the breath. You lose the concept of inside and outside. The more that you don't hear the breath, the more softer you are with the locks and everything. It's more gentle. So then it's like a gentle transition of, I'm putting this body down, going into a parallel life or going into a dream, whatever you want to call it. And it's a gentle transition as opposed to like rapidly speeding up the breath to get a cycle, hyperventilation. You're getting a uprush of air, and then you get a circulation of blood to the tissues really rapidly from out of the organs. And that gives you this euphoria from Wim Hof. And it's nice for cooling down if you've been doing a bunch of Tumo and you need to just cool your body down, do a bunch of breaths and stay present. You want to keep breathing. So you do it in that period to cool down, and then you jump back on your Tumo. You jump back into your 1 breath per minute, and it's a lot more gentle. It's a gentle way to drop your body and a gentle way to control your nervous system. And I think Wim Hof can complement it as far as cooling it down, but it's not the best base for breath work.
And the one breath a minute, is this like are you doing a 30-second long inhale and a 30-second long exhale, or is it a 10-second inhale and exhale and then a hold, or how does the
it's like the way babies breathe. You're expanding all the diaphragms, and then you slowly inhale in. It could take you anywhere from like 8 to 15 seconds, depending on how big your lungs are, but I'll say generally about 8 seconds to fully inhale the lungs, to slowly do it, slowly alter the posture to where the lower lungs, middle lungs, upper lungs, everything's getting filled with the air. And then you lock the bandhas, so you apply that pressure, the same pressure that you would apply to stop your urine midstream. You're locking that bandha beneath the diaphragms, and then you push your tongue to the roof of your mouth to lock the breath in the top, so you don't have any leakage up there of energy or breath. So then, and then the pushing the tongue to the roof of the roof of the mouth pushes against the pituitary, and then that stimulates the pineal, and then you get the visuals in the brain. You're getting the releases of light in the brain, and you can have those psychedelic breaths. So you're taking the breath, takes about 8 seconds, then you lock it from anywhere from 45 seconds to a minute, holding it with those locks on the top and on the bottom, and then you slowly release it, and then you wait anywhere from 8 to 15 seconds with no breath in your body to take another breath. And for some people, you're going to have to build up to that state where, you just hold them for 30 seconds, and then maybe 4 or 5 seconds after you exhale, then you breathe again. You're doing it half, you cut it in half, and then you gradually build it to where you hold for a minute, exhale, hold for 8 to 15 seconds, hold, breathe again, hold for a minute, exhale, 8 to 15 seconds, breathe again. So once you generate a rhythm that's kind of in there, it's generally in that range, about a minute on a breath, then you're tapping into the delta wave state in your brain, and you're operating from a different wavelength, and you can tap into the deeper parts of your being, your subconscious, which people call your subconscious, but it's really the super consciousness. So you just got to slow the bandwidth. You got to slow that wavelength down to the delta, to where you can make sense of things. Because once if you're passing out, going to sleep, and you're just entering timelessness without any conscious development or peaceful development into that state of being, you're just gonna have a bunch of jumbled dreams and probably wake up tired. But if you control the breath, and then you all day, and then maybe control the breath before you go to sleep, then your brain's already operating at a less jagged up and down. The oscillation and the up and down, the karmic flow of the brainwave is not as jagged. It's a more smooth up and down oscillation of brainwaves, so where you can make sense of things. That's why people do psychedelics. It's taking their brain into a certain place to where they can fully think out the thought, and fully, and then they reach the other side of the thought, and then that can bring them to a different paradigm or a different concept because they've fully thought it out. But people don't fully think their thoughts out because of the trauma, or because some part of that thought doesn't align with their persona, their identity or concept of themselves, idea of themselves. So they never fully think the thought out. So they stay stuck at that paradigm because they're not fully thinking the thought out. So it's just about completion, It's just about completion of breath, inhale and exhale, fully doing it, and then getting into the rhythm of it to where your algorithm becomes in alignment with the circadian rhythm, the overall algorithm, and then there's no separation of consciousness between you and the source of consciousness. So that the way of achieving that is through a gentle transition, and that's Tumo is a more gentle way of reaching that place.
Wow, yeah, I'm feeling really inspired to go and try that. I've done like box breathing with the longer holds on the inhale and the exhale, but I've never done it with the holds, like holding, like stopping urine, or holding my tongue on the roof of my mouth. Like that's definitely something to play with. And again, pretty blown away by everything else you shared.
Yeah. Yeah, I know people think I'm crazy, man, but if they just had a conversation with me, I could really explain this thing really well. It's just that when you're just posting on the gram, people have short attention spans. You just got to catch them with the parts that catch them. So people, they get triggered and then they're mad that they're triggered. So then it's all, you dealing with that whole process of attracting people that are triggered, and that's the difficulty I think in it, but if people just had a conversation with me, it's really not that crazy.
Yeah, there's like you're really giving people a gift by triggering them.
Yeah, it's like I'm poking at you this nerve that you forgot was there or you ignore, and it's like if you just remember it, then you can feel with it. You can feel the other side of it. You can go get through the ugly truth to the beautiful truth.
Here I am breathing loud. Really, really inspiring. Really inspiring.
Once that breath, once you don't hear it, then there's no, especially if it's gentle, the way you're moving the diaphragms, there's no concept of in and out. And then there's no concept of self. And all is just oneness. And it becomes increasingly impossible for you to look at other people as other or you as separate from them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like there is no self or other at that point. You're just like observing the breath. Like the breath is like the swinging door and you're like the doorway. So like there is no in or out. They're the same. And so once you slow the breath down like that and you don't hear it and it's just this perception of air over an hour or so, then you really start to lose it. Like it's sensory deprivation at some level, and again, why people do psychedelics to close one door, or they say there's light coming through a window and it's creating a glare. You close the window so you can see more clearly. It's kind of the same thing, you're closing your eyes when you meditate, you're maybe listening to music, closing your ears, whatever it is, you're doing sensory deprivation to close one door to see clearly through another one. And that's to me the most gentle way to do that is through the breath work. I mean, you could do a bunch of DMT and stuff like that, but it's not going to be sustained. It's not going to be a practical piece. It's going to be chemical piece. Because practice is perfect, man. Once you got a practice that you've enjoyed, then you can enjoy the process, and then there's really no bad sessions. You enjoy your practice, so there's no losing in it.
Yeah, each rep's informing the next.
Yeah. That's a difficult thing, man. You really just want to share it. And I really do love people like I love me, or however you want to look at that. You know what I mean? Like, it's all one. So it's a wild thing, the discernment, the responsibility of discernment, where you can't speak when it's not appropriate, because then when you are supposed to speak, you might not have the breath for it, or you might not be connecting the way you should be energetically, because you got flustered from speaking to somebody that you shouldn't have been even speaking to. So it's kind of like the appropriation of energy becomes apparent the more that you align with the breath, and all your movements just get in accord with the breath. So because you're not separate from life as a whole, and it makes it easier to discern. But while you're going through the process, is it can be difficult for you, because a lot of people, you see their potential because you can see from your own, and it's painful to watch them hurt themselves and neglect. And you kind of got to be like a grandmother with it, where you're just like, well, baby's gonna fucking fall down and scrape his knee. It's gonna happen. You know what I mean? And some people are gonna literally die before they really realize, and you just got to accept that that's just part of their process. And they were probably just a fragment. This probably not their base reality, and you got to experience them, and you just got to appreciate that you got to experience yourself and that through them in that way, the way that they express you. And so that's kind of like where I found a way to be content. It's just, realizing that you don't have to, you can love people and not hurt yourself. You know what I mean? It's really that simple. You don't have to hurt yourself to love people.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
And the breath is the thing that we all have to do. It's the most universal thing. Somebody might be vegan, vegetarian, raw foodist, um, fruitarian. Somebody might be totally carnal, um, pescatarians or whatever they are. Different people that are in different sides of the spectrum. Everybody's relying on the breath, though. Doesn't really matter. We're all using the same breath. So if you really want to get back at somebody, you just got to charge the breath. That the breath has to go your breath has to go through them because it's going through everybody. So the more that you charge it and cycle it through your body, it's like you're cycling through the universal body, through everybody. And that's your key towards change anyway. It's your only shot in heaven anyway. So it's it's really, it's everything though. It's all you need. That's the terrible thing. People can look at it like, man, that's all I can do is breathe. I'm like, yeah, it's more than enough. It's really all you need. It's just that impatience, wanting to see things unfold like Grand Theft Auto or something. But